Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Zimbabwe is a country in a mess. And I think that it has become so chaotic that really it looks like nobody really knows what's happening. And sometimes one feels that some people are deliberately adding to the confusion. Here is a video professionally done, claiming that Zimbabwe is going to hold fresh elections in 2 months' time, 30th of April. I don't know where it came from, but there it is. Let's just listen to it.
Election doesn't meet the standards of a democratic process? Let's take a closer look at Zimbabwe's 2023 elections, which were criticized by the Southern African Development Community, or SADC, for falling short of democratic standards. The SADC, as per their guidelines and principles, has the mandate to uphold electoral standards in member countries. And this includes the authority to call for fresh elections when the process is flawed. In the case of Zimbabwe, this is exactly what happened. The SADC's Electoral Observation Mission reported that the elections in Zimbabwe did not meet the revised SADC guidelines for a democratic election. This implies that the process to elect the president, members of parliament, and councillors was flawed. The SADC, after following due processes, resolved that fresh elections should be held in Zimbabwe. It's important to note that the formalities that allowed the elections to happen were carried out correctly, but the conduct of the elections themselves was flawed. That's why the SADC did not call for a repetition of formalities, but for fresh elections. The SADC has the authority to enforce resolutions for fair and transparent elections, and in Zimbabwe's case, they have called for fresh elections. What does it mean for Zimbabwe to have fresh elections?
Well, I'll stop there for a minute. Benjamin, do you remember when hearing about this SADC resolution calling for fresh elections? Because I don't.
Good day to you. No, I do not recall them saying anything about fresh elections. I know about the recommendations, and that's about it. And their SADC report that was stating that Zimbabwe elections, fell short of the guidelines, but to an extent of saying that there should be fresh elections, I never heard about it.
This is what is really annoying about some of these videos. Yes, the elections were not free, fair, and credible. Yes, SADC, the AU, and even Zimbabwe's own Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission election observers condemned the process as flawed. But SADC, as far as I know, as an organization, did accept the report, and there was a lot of talk about, or SADC was sending representatives to talk about fresh elections, and that never happened. And now all of a sudden we hear it's coming back again, and we hear that they've made a resolution that Zimbabwe should hold free elections. This is absurd. But I think we can well guess the source of this, because if you look at the bottom right-hand side of that video, you can see, Love and Chamisa. Do you seriously think? I believe this could well be sponsored by Chamisa, or at least sponsored by those who are sponsoring Chamisa. When
it comes to this, it's social media. Let's not forget. Anything can be doctored, and anything can mean, whatever. But unless we get a formal, acknowledgement that this is the stance that they have taken, we could just might as well put it as one from the rumor mill for now.
It's most unfortunate that we keep having these utterly meaningless videos. But anyway, let's listen to the rest of it. We can comment on the rest of it.
This question has been on the minds of many. Indeed, it's a significant step towards restoring democracy. You see, the previous elections were marred by irregularities. The formalities leading up to the elections, such as the dissolution of parliament, were conducted correctly. However, the actual conduct of the elections fell short of the revised SADC guidelines and principles of a democratic election. This means that currently there are no legitimate holders of the posts of president, MPs, and councillors. These positions are essentially vacant, and this political vacuum is a matter of grave concern. But there's a silver lining. The SADC's mandate is clear. The flawed election process needs to be repeated, not the formalities. So, what's next for Zimbabwe? Fresh elections. This is a chance for Zimbabwe to correct the flaws of the previous election. It's an opportunity to re-establish trust in the electoral process and to reinstate a legitimate government that truly represents the will of the Zimbabwean people. It's a chance for a new beginning, and the date for this new beginning is June 30th. Fresh elections are a chance for Zimbabwe to correct the flaws of the previous election and
correct the flaws of the previous elections. June the 30th, that's 2 months away. Now, how do you correct the flaws of the last election? And one of those flaws, we should not forget, was a failure to produce a verified voters roll. How do you produce a verified voters roll in 2 months?
And who is in charge of correcting the process is the other question. So you find out there's so many unanswered questions. I mean, surely you can't just say, I don't think it's possible to just say, fix the situation now, fix the flaws, and within 2 months have everything done. I don't see it possible. There's a lot of, the whole process, as SADC says, fell short. So surely, it's got to take time. A lot of things need to be remedied before we even start thinking about elections. I think this is just bogus.
I think it's, this issue of we can correct it in 2 months' time is totally meaningless. And yes, in the social media, there are those CCC supporters, Chamisa supporters, who are excited about fresh elections, and they've been promoting this video with the usual passion. This is the lack of understanding what a democratic election is all about. And in this particular case, the other aspect of it is, even if we were to go with the present, whoever is on the voters' roll, and we accept that as those are the people who should be on the voters' roll, forget those who have been deliberately left out. Even if we accept that, we are still looking at a situation here where ever since the August election, CCC has all but imploded. If you were Zanu PF, you would not object to holding fresh elections now. This is the best time probably Zanu PF will ever have of winning an election without rigging it, because there is no opposition. The opposition is all but imploded. There is no opposition out there. If we're going to accuse Zanu PF of rigging the elections, what they have done in helping the opposition to implode is probably one of the worst things in terms of undermining Zimbabwe's democratic processes is concerned. And at a critical time like that, when the opposition is all but imploded, you call for fresh elections. Who is going to benefit? You know, this, if I was Zanu PF, I would promote or be promoting this video. If this is the price we are going to pay for having legitimacy, let's go ahead. Yeah, please, let's go ahead. This is totally meaningless.
Yeah, you are right. It really does come at a time where the opposition is in sixes and sevens. I mean, that is if there is an opposition, because they're still Chamisa is still yet to come forward and say, this is my intention. For now, he's taking a sabbatical away from all this circus that I think they created themselves. So it doesn't bring any joy whatsoever. It just, is just going to just create a platform where Zanu PF, if it's true, Zanu PF is actually going to be delighted, like you say, that this time, even though SADC said, let's go back to the drawing board and have fresh elections, we still beat you. And I think this will close the door for any help towards Zimbabwe. And this, I dread to think of elections now when the current situation is like this, especially in the opposition. I think they're at the most weakest and the most vulnerable moment. Nobody knows, even the electorate doesn't know what is going on. It's a circus, basically. I dread to think that if Zanu PF is to win an election that they have been forced into, and they would laugh at this and they would have it in our face for a very, very long time.
To be quite honest, if this present situation continues, this carry-on continues, we'll be saying the same thing about 2028 when elections are due. The country will be going to fresh elections without even one token reform implemented. And trust me, as much as Nelson Chamisa has resigned from his party, by then you will be back. And even some of the other actors like Tendai BT who have taken a sabbatical, trust me, they will be back. The problem we have in Zimbabwe is we have an opposition that has learned that as long as they participate and give the process legitimacy, they will be rewarded by the few gravy train seats that the regime is dangling to entice them to participate. SADC, I believe SADC would have denied Zanu PF legitimacy at the end of last year's elections if, number one, the opposition had not participated. Two, if ordinary Zimbabweans themselves had not been conned by the opposition into participating. Whether we like to admit it or not, nearly 2 million people voted for the opposition alone in last year's elections. Why did you participate if you knew the process was flawed? And number three, the opposition candidates who won those few gravy train seats, even when they knew that SADC and the AU had condemned the process as flawed, they still went ahead and accepted those seats, endorsing the process. The likes of Tendai BT were on record saying, "Oh, we can't give up. Those are liberated zones." In other words, those votes that the opposition managed to win, they claimed that the process in those areas were free, fair, and credible. Of course, that was nonsense. The process entails elections which should have a verified voters roll, for instance. And there was no verified voters roll, not only in the rural areas where Zanu PF was frog marching people to go and vote, but even in the urban centers, there was no verified voters roll. Zanu PF has accepted the political reality that as long as they participate, they've got a few people in the opposition who participate, they will gain political legitimacy. That is a price they've been willing to pay. There's no such thing as liberated zone. And as long as we've got an electorate, an opposition that is prepared to participate in these flawed elections to give Zanu PF legitimacy, we are going to have this over and over again. I dismiss this report as just another one to time wasting debate. But the most important thing is whether we accept this fresh elections or not. It's regardless. We will soon be going into 2028 elections, and without any meaningful reform, we will be going into those elections with the opposition keen as mustard to participate, and they will participate, and the process itself will produce another illegitimate government, which by participating will give Zanu PF legitimacy, and we are back to square one. I think that is what I find so depressing about this situation.
I agree with you. I mean, I still maintain to say, SADC, we have always given SADC stick to say, SADC are not doing, right by us, the majority in Zimbabwe or the citizens of Zimbabwe. But now I think it's clear as daylight. First we let the opportunity of the GNU pass us by. Then right here, just yesterday, last year, after the election, after SADC came with the best report they've ever, jotted down or written down, to say that they're condemning the whole process as nothing but, a farce. It was so flawed. It did not meet even Zimbabwe's own constitution, and the entire SADC region and their resolutions, right? And the taking up of the seats, I think it must have baffled even SADC themselves to say, look, we are trying to show that this process did not, it was just a farce. But here is the opposition ready to be sworn in by an illegitimate government. I think this, even if it was you would have given up to say, I cannot help this. How best can you help them? Help me help you, right? I think this was where everything just died out. This here story that is now coming up, first of all, the time frame, I think is very impossible. There's a lot of things that need to be sorted out before we even think of an election. It's just so much. 2 months is impossible, really. it's impossible. And I think SADC are not foolish to think that, you know, we can just do it in such a short space of time. So I think it's one from the rumor mill, somebody that had nothing to do and decided to make a short video.
Thank you very much, Benjamin, and to the listeners, thank you very much for for joining us today. Again, my closing remark would be that forget this video calling for fresh election 30th of June. I don't think it has got any substance at all. I think SADC would be betraying the people of Zimbabwe if they were behind such a foolish move. But most important of all, what we are looking at here is Zimbabwe is still not focused on the main purpose, i.e., let's implement the democratic reforms to make sure that 2028 elections are free, fair, and credible. Zimbabweans are still looking to the opposition, which, like I said, has imploded, and getting themselves even organized for the 2028 election is going to be a serious challenge, let alone to get any meaningful reforms implemented. My suggestion to the people of Zimbabwe is accepting the political reality that MDC, CCC leaders are corrupt and breathtakingly incompetent and utterly, utterly useless. You accept that, you will get yourself as a nation focusing now on the real task ahead, i.e., making sure that you've got a competent opposition that will focus on getting reforms before elections. If you do not get reforms before elections, 2028 will just be a repeat of 2023, a repeat of 2018, etc. We have got to stop this circus. And if we don't stop it, we will pay for it. That's my last word. Thank you very much again, Benjamin, for your opinion on the matter. And to the listeners, thank you very much for joining us, and have a good day.
Thank you. Good night to you all.